All right, welcome to another episode of Fintech Corner. We're here at AFP 25. I'm joined by Kyle Fisher. Thank you for joining us with CSG International. And I thought this was going to be a fun interview because when I read through the brief, it said disruptor. And I wanted to dig in just kind of right out of the gate. What about your career, kind of jumping into organizations, seeing where they are from a technology process, etc. perspective, has kind of given you this almost persona of a disruptor?
Well, I mean, I think I've had a somewhat storied career. I've already been in maybe 5 publicly traded companies. So I've jumped around a little bit. But I think in each one, it's when you get in and kind of understand the current processes and procedures. We're coming from multiple different companies. You can get a lay of the land of like, okay, who's doing what and how they do the same treasury functions differently. And so that's where I think being the new kid on the block, you can quickly see like, oh, we're doing maybe this process because we've always done that process, but it's not the best process. So there's always that like, why do you do it this way? Because we always have. And especially in companies that, are more tenured, those processes are usually out of date. So that's where you can kind of get in there and as the new guy be like, hey, well, let's leverage the new technologies to, just create more automation, reduce manual efforts, manual risks, and just free up time.
What have been almost, if you wanted to make like a list, maybe the top 3 innovators playbook that you've had in your back pocket every time you kind of approach a new situation? Have there been consistencies?
I mean, in Treasury, right? I think, your biggest ones are, your bank connections, right?
Yeah.
So do you have a TMS? Yes or no? If you don't have a TMS, how are you getting all your bank feeds? If you're pulling it manually, then you need to be doing something else.
Yeah.
And then it's, like your collections and your payments, right? Do you have visibility into your AR, your AP? How are those feeds into your bank? Do you have like automated payments files, right? Or are you manually like extracting a notcha file and then manually upload? So I think those are usually where I first jump in and start because that's a big time saver.
Yeah.
And then it usually audit is very happy with that as well because then there's less manual touch,
right?
Especially those sensitive areas. And, even if it sits in like an, accounting team or whatever, ultimately, right, it benefits you in Treasury because you get better cash visibility, quicker visibility. So that's always where I kind of, when I started new companies, understanding their processes and how it leads up to, okay, how can I better cash forecast? So
we obviously are in a different, a lot has happened since COVID. I feel like everybody was pushed to adopt not just technology, but the cloud, new SaaS tools, now AI, data platforms, etc. All these buzzwords are floating around. As you've navigated that space, what have you seen as kind of the thread that you can consistently pull when implementing some of these systems? Have there been consistencies on that front?
I mean, I think, right, you guys will know, I think the cloud players are moving a lot faster. Your margins are better. So I think anybody who is doing on-prem, I mean, ERPs, right? I mean, you see Oracle in the news, right? Everybody who's like in cloud native solutions now are just moving faster and better.
Right.
And then especially, the younger ones moving in that space, like the Trovatas, right? Like you don't have all that legacy code, so you can make some of those changes quicker and faster. And so, yeah, whenever it's looking for these maybe third-party solutions, the ones that are cloud native and potentially some of the younger ones sometimes are kind of doing it better than some of these older legacy systems.
Are there any trends that are taking you by surprise? Just kind of how fast they've been evolving and pressures that they've been putting on you just as a program lead?
I mean, the biggest, right? Everybody's talking AI. So that's where, I'm here at this conference to learn more about AI and talk to peers and figure out, okay, what should I be thinking about? How should I be thinking about it? because that's kind of, that's our next move, right? Not in Treasury, but across the globe, right? Every aspect is going to be changed by AI, and it's going to change fast. So, in one of the sessions, they're talking like, if you're going to, anybody who's not using AI, you're going to get beat out by the person who is using AI.
Yeah.
So not as like a competition, but like it's something to be thinking about. So that's where our company is very, not only in our own solutions are putting in AI into our products and solutions, but internally we have like every department is really tasked with, you need to start using AI.
Yeah.
Not like in whatever aspect, whether you're just using, Copilot to like Google stuff,
Right.
or if you're like really embedding it to, start your vibe coding, that's where it's going. So that's where I'm trying to start, especially I've got takeaways. I got a little notebook of AI stuff and like, okay, what could I start doing? And I think that's where a lot of focus is going to be, because again, like I'm leveraging these tools, but there's other manual stuff I'm doing.
Right.
Can AI agents do that for me? So I can free up more time for more analytics or, other projects. So
it's very interesting. In fact, just the previous conversation, I was speaking to one of your peers, different company, and he was telling me about how they have adopted Copilot, just like you mentioned. They have ChatGPT as well in their fleet. And the topic du jour is not whether or not they're going to use AI. They're using it. But now it's a question of, where's it going to get its data from? How is it going to be integrated into every system? And so he kind of positioned the conversation back at me, which is not fun because I'm supposed to be doing the interviewing. And he said, what are you guys going to do about data portability? And what's interesting about that question is it's your data, right? So it's always been your data. You can do whatever you want with it. Today, we offer it back through APIs.
Right.
What's interesting about the world of AI is that might not be good enough. That might be slowing things down to a degree. I mean, we're talking about AI stacks that have their own dedicated servers that feed them data exclusively. There's no other thing that is powering it. And I wonder, have you guys had any conversations internally about the future of your own data infrastructure to feed the AI programs that are in their infancy right now, but obviously they're going to be adopted really aggressively?
I wouldn't pretend to know the extent of that, but like our CIO organization are aggressively pursuing this, and they are having those conversations. They have like internal like competitions with themselves on who can come up with like the coolest AI use cases and like develop these things. So it's very much a top of mind. I don't know the ins and outs of all the conversations, but again, like our CIO organization is pushing extremely hard on that. So that is, the intent, like how are we storing our data? How are we managing the integrity of our data, right? How do we make sure that it is being like clean data, right? That's the whole thing. You can have data, great, but it needs to be clean, good data, right? For then, AI to be used for. So I think it's a bit of a revolving conversation. Yeah. Right. As these things keep progressing, we're going to keep learning more and know how to do it better and faster. But that's our CIO organization. I think the single-minded focus is AI. How do we deploy AI in like every aspect of our business, internal and then in our products?
One thing that we've been seeing, just we've had AI in Trovata at this point for almost 3 years, built on ChatGPT. We haven't hidden that at all. Like it is ChatGPT that powers it. One thing, though, that has been curious about the rollout is that it started with effectively a search replacement. People were using it instead of, what our hypothesis was at the beginning. You could use it to build reports and do all kinds of complicated things. Instead, people were using it, instead of going to the search bar, just going in there and saying, needle in the haystack, find this thing for me because I don't want to look for it myself, or come up with the right filters to find it.
Right.
That was the first few years. Now, I don't know if it's been influenced by GPT-5 or even before at 4.1, but the questions are becoming paragraphs. They're kind of becoming more complex tasks. And where we're hitting a wall is we put a lot of restraint into our system, and there seems to be this appetite of, no, just remove the restraint. I want it to have direct access to all my transactions balances and let it do whatever it wants in there. And I wanted to see what your take is on this. Do you feel like we're at a moment where we should be solving governance so that we can remove the restraints, or do you think that we should still be cautious as we move forward?
I mean, there has to be caution, right? I know even when we're signing up for AI, the longest discussion isn't even the price point.
Yeah.
It's the security. And like, is our proprietary data safe?
Right.
And so I think that has to always be first and foremost. Because right, once it's out, it's out.
Right.
So it's gotta be, you know, yeah, maybe you're handcuffed, but we're all playing in this kind of new sandbox. So it's okay maybe if it takes a little bit longer for us to get in there, because once we're in there, that's kind of it, right? We're all going to be playing in AI. It's not going away. So I think it's better to do it right the first time than to just kind of like go ham and then have to fix that later. But like, I agree, it did very much. It's, you know, it replaces your like Google, right? Of like, hey, can you show me this transaction, or like find this, or like, what is that? To then like, could you like, once you kind of build on that knowledge of like knowing and learning what AI can maybe do, that's when you start pushing those bounds where you might get from like a mini sentence to like a full paragraph of like, can you do this?
A job description.
And you kind of
basically
build up to it, right? And see like what are the bounds that it can do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's exploratory.
Let me ask you that $1,000,000 question that everybody's trying to figure out at this conference. Will you trust agentic systems with payments?
With payments and what? Like let them do the payments by themselves?
It's a good question. Let me frame it in a couple of different cases. From least risky to most risky. The least and obvious ones right now are, would you ever trust an agentic system to effectively recommend the payments that should be made right now with your approval? The medium risk is move funds strategically to balance your balance sheet and do it in a way that's taking risk into consideration. If you have FX, if you have a variety of different, you know, complex hedges, etc., figure all that out, set up the money movement, and then you approve it. And then finally, the highest risk is, oh yeah, do all of that.
Just let it go. I mean, right, in this stage, no, because I think it's all trust but verify, right? So one, you'd have to know where it's built, like, you know, baby steps, right? You got to get it ingrained into like payables. You got to ingrain into receivables. You got to get it ingrained into your forecast. You got to ingrained into, you know, training it for, you know, what are you aiming for, right? Especially you have excess cash. What is your goal, right?
Right.
Are you doing share buybacks? Are you doing dividends? Are you paying down debt? Are you chasing interest income, right? Like, what are your goals and your targets? And I mean, if you could do baby steps and get it up to that point where it's like, it is constantly recommending what I want it to do every time, will I let it automatically do it? Probably no. But would I trust it to get to that point? And then it just says, hey, here's your list of things that we should do today. And then I can hit the button and say, sounds great. Yeah, I'd love it. But, you know, it's that trust but verify. You got to get to that stage first. You got to build up to it. It's the same as a new employee, right? Like, you don't just give them the keys right out the gate. You got to train them, make sure, cool, you got this. Now let's move on to the next. So
What's interesting about this technology is that the feedback cycle is so quick, right? With an employee, you might have to let that play out over a year, and there might be a lot of errors that play out along the way. With these systems, you could have that cycle once per day and have, you know, the positive, negative happen multiple times, and you give it instructions that improve it, you know, materially in a single day. And it makes me wonder, and it's a framing for kind of the last question that is kind of a futurist question. What do you think your job is going to look like over the next 10 years? You've already had such a transformative approach to Treasury, I'd say, compared to your peers. One of the most interesting conversations that I had last year at the previous AFP was with one of the treasurers at Block that said something that really was confusing, but made sense after I thought about it for a little bit. They said that they felt like they're turning into more of a product manager for Treasury than an actual treasurer, almost as if it's their job to design systems, processes, and then make sure that those are working as they expect, and less so doing the actual job of treasury. And it was kind of like a, really? That's playing out? But then when you see kind of the operations of the apps that they're building and the degree of automation that they're shooting for, it made me wonder, is that the future of this job? But also maybe a hybrid of that is more leverage, right? You're spending your time doing more strategic thinking than actually doing the day-to-day of treasury. So I know that's a lot said, but the setup being futurist hat on, where do you think this job is
I
going?
mean, I think that's right, though, right? Because you say, like, is that the role of I mean, isn't that the role of Treasury?
Right.
I don't know. I feel like that's always been the role of Treasury, right? Is like building those systems, right? Because again, then it allows you to do your Treasury job, which your Treasury job is, how do I manage this cash? How do I manage like all these things underneath me? And the best way to do that is to build those systems in the right way.
Right.
So you can get the data you need, you can get the answers you need, and then you can just spend more time doing your analysis or your high level thought process, right?
Yeah.
Especially then when you're like, hey, what are we doing with our cash? Are we doing M&A? So I think building the systems and infrastructure faster, better, stronger is part of your treasury gig. And yeah, the future of this is just maybe a lot more of those systems are going to be managing AI agents.
Right.
And having multiple AI agents that are, this AI agent is doing this portion of a historical, maybe manual treasury workbooks or whatever. And, you're going to have this AI agent that's doing, maybe your tax portions and like your other, AP and your AR and your M&A kind of decision making. And you have another one layered over that's doing your scenarios or your investment portfolio, right? And then you're managing like little AI bots as opposed to maybe doing so much infrastructure work, hopefully because you've already laid the infrastructure, or then, maybe not have as big a robust treasury team, which, I mean, in my case, it's usually a pretty lean, mean team anyway.
Right. So it's almost like, correct me if this is too big of a stretch, but it's almost a transition from a risk management role to a risk architecture role.
Yeah,
Where
I think that's fair.
you're not really actively managing it anymore because there's software managing it, but it's more like you're designing. You're designing things that many pieces of software and orchestration are doing.
And I think it comes back to that original of like, do we release the guardrails?
Right.
Because, right, if you get to that point where there is so much systems managing and AI managing so much stuff, you got to make sure that you can trust it all.
Right.
Because then, of course, the most fun of a treasury is then internal audit comes knocking and asks, hey, but is this all done correctly? Is it all done safe? Right.
Right.
And I think that's where audit is going to have a giant, our IT team and our audit team is going to get probably closer together as they're going to probably be the ones tasked with really managing some of that.
Right. So I'm curious if this all plays out, let's say, because I don't really hear much about if I had the free time, what would I do with it, right? And it's usually answers like, well, I'd use it to analyze and, do forecasting, stuff like that. But I'm curious, because you already run a very complex operation today, would you make it any more complex if you had the leverage to take advantage of in the form of agents and things like that? Would you push the boundaries even further?
I mean, if you say if I got some free time right now, I'm going to go start playing more with agents. Like that's
Right.
where, my takeaways from some of these sessions, yesterday and today is, hey, here's some like agents that I've built. And I mean, I think even internally we have the tools to build our own agents to some degree.
Right.
Do we have the best and maybe the correct AI ones? Maybe not at the moment, but they're coming. To the individual users, a CIO org has more, but that's where like my free time, if I do have free time, like I'm playing with AI.
Yeah.
And to that extent, if it's been that like initial of like, oh, just Googling like a one word thing to now I'm querying paragraphs of like, what's the bounds that you can provide back? And I think playing now with agents is the next step for me.
Absolutely.
And really seeing how far can I take this like internally myself with the current tools. And then when I get access to the latest and greatest tools, can we take it further? I mean, it's going to happen. And again, if you're not using AI in the workplace, you're going to get left behind because
Yeah,
Just like if you weren't using the internet in the 90s, like you're going to start getting behind.
and with every technology, let's say, truncation of time, it almost seems like the side effect is the leverage you get isn't just like speed and automation. It's you can take more risk, right? Because you have higher levels of precision. It's why, I think of stories of Apple and other kind of big tech companies that operate on the bleeding edge of operations with regards to stock of units that they distribute throughout the world. Where in the past they might have to fill a warehouse to have stock for a market, and now they can have it within, plus or minus 1 day of stock and trust that all of their infrastructure will be able to supply it. And all of the math that you had to do, working backwards from I have a MacBook Pro that's on a shelf to did I have enough stock to manufacture it in the first place? Did we have enough money in operating accounts to pay for that stock? Did we hedge the balance sheets appropriately so that we don't get hit every single time by FX fluctuations that are happening in, wherever because of tariffs, etc. That complexity has been worked out to such a degree that they can operate on such a bleeding edge of 1 day of supply, basically.
Right.
And I'm curious, do you feel like the same will play out because of agentic workflows?
I think so. I think it'll allow all of us to just tighten up, right?
Yeah.
Not have to operate with so much, buffer and wiggle room or, sandbagging my forecasts, right? And I think we're going to be able to shrink that degree of like, whatever you operate under, if it's a 5 degree margin or, to maybe a 2,
right?
And hopefully shorter and shorter, right? Because you're going to get that and you'll be comfortable with it. So
it's a hard question because it doesn't exist yet.
No, but it's where are we going?
Right.
And I think no one denies that's where we're heading. So
for our viewers, a lot of the insight that they get is kind of the access to the brain of the person that we're interviewing. And I'm curious, if you were to give one piece of advice to the audience that's watching this podcast right now and kind of evaluating their future, whether it's purchasing a piece of software or creating a new system internally, what would it be?
Any piece of advice? Oh man. I think it's always better to do it right the first time and to be diligent and thoughtful with your execution. Even if it's slower, it's better in the long run. So whether that's right, like if it takes longer to evaluate the software, it's fine. It's better to, not rush it and then have to unwind it.
Right.
But like ultimately you got to do it. So I think that's where it's like, what are your long-term goals? And if it's getting a TMS system, it's getting into a new ERP, whether it's developing these AIs, it's like start some form of it today.
Yeah.
Start it moving. Don't feel rushed to like, pull the trigger if you're not feeling comfortable. Like make sure you get comfortable because you want to make sure you're signing on for the right piece for you and your needs. And then once you have it, just go. So that's where, I know it's hard to dedicate the time and the resources, but I feel like that's always where I get the most bang for my buck, especially when I join a new company is like,
yeah,
hey, I know I have a lot to do, but like, this is where I got to spend my focus. So like for the first however long, this is going to be the only thing I'm really going to dedicate time to.
And it creates the space to get to the value.
To do all the rest. So
that's awesome advice.
That's probably the same advice anybody would give, but it's the like, don't get in over your head and over your skis too early. Like make sure you pick the right thing and go for it first.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you coming by and hope you have a great rest of the conference.
Yeah, you as well. Appreciate it.
Sweet.